In January of 2002, I was back for the holidays. Dad came in the room, he had a copy of the Boston Globe, and he threw it down on the table and he said, "This'll make you sick." It was the first edition of the Globe where they broke the whole story. I looked at it and I said, "No, Dad, this doesn't make me sick, this makes me happy." About 8 years after I had gone through this thing with the Archdiocese, now all the stories were coming out, and I didn't have to stand alone when I was talking about this. And the Globe was relentless at that point. They just kept digging up more and more stuff. The courts forced the diocese to open up all of their files on all of these priests. The ad that we put in the newspapers, do you remember Father Birmingham? That was in the files. The smoking gun that I was looking for, who reported Birmingham when Birmingham was at Our Lady of Fatima in Sudbury, it was there in the files. They told the parents in Sudbury they were going to hospitalize him in Salem. He was going to get treatment there and might actually become like the chaplain of the Salem hospital. So they sent him to Salem and they put him in charge of the altar boys. When he was in Brighton, he was the chaplain to the juvenile court. In Gloucester, he was made pastor, the ultimate authority. It made it very clear that the Archdiocese knew about him as early as 1964 and all the way through his career. The Boston Globe back in, I guess, 92 or 93 had some information about Birmingham, and they tried to call Sister Grace Kenny. She called the Archdiocese and said, "What should I do?" In the files, Father John McCormick basically says, tell her not to say anything. Tell her not to go looking into the records. Tell her not to talk to the Globe.
In my days, when a priest told you that tomorrow you're going to go to hell, you figure you accepted it, And it's a different item now for me that's about priests. They're nothing but a bunch of hypocrites.
Birmingham was molesting me, there was that sense I was going through some strange indoctrination, some ritual. Along with trying to get some sexual gratification, he was trying to change my life. He was trying to take me out of the realm of young boys who were going to have a normal sexual life. Because he had given that up, he was going to say, "Okay, Paul, you don't get it either. I'm going to put this darkness in your life."
December 2002. After publicly admitting he had placed sexually abusive priests in new assignments, and facing several lawsuits and parishioner rage over his handling of multiple cases, Boston's Cardinal Bernard Law is forced to resign.
Through the course of the year 2002, I made some contact with some of the people who had formed the Survivors of Joe Birmingham. In January 2003, they had organized a meeting in Salem where Bishop McCormick was going to come and talk to the group and answer their questions. At this point in my life, if there's one thing that's really stuck with me and made me feel real bitter, it was the way that McCormick treated my case, and now we're looking at these files, how he treated lots of them.
I might hang out over here tonight. I hope I can keep my voice together.
So it's been a process getting to this point to get him down here?
A lot of work. Most of these guys from this group we're in, they're going public and now getting therapy and meeting all these other guys and doing this while you supposedly work for a living. It's amazing.
These guys had this thing really well organized. There were well over 100 people who showed up. Family, old friends. Mom and Dad were there, and Hartley, my ex-wife, showed up. And then the so-called Bishop John McCormick showed up and said how he never thought that his return to Salem would be under these circumstances. There must have been about 7 or 8 people who got up and just told their stories. It was incredibly moving. Jamie Hogan said, I remember you coming over to our house for dinner all the time when I was a kid. What would you say to my father if my father was here alive? How would you explain that you didn't do anything about this? There was a woman who got up, the sister of a man in Lowell who had been abused by Birmingham and who had committed suicide. I read this statement that I wrote. I've flown across the country from Sacramento, California, the town where I now live, to Salem, the town where I was born and grew up, to ask John McCormick some questions. I hope you'll understand why I do not address John as father. My father is here in the audience, and John McCormick does not deserve to share that title with him.
How'd that make you feel?
I was pretty proud. You're not fit to be called a father. He says, there is my father and mother there. Remember that? Yeah.
How can you say that you didn't know about this when 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, here's the evidence? Why are you lying?